Hey there, Careblazer. Welcome back to another episode of Careblazers TV. I'm so excited about today's episode because I'm interviewing Laura Smothers-Chu. She's another educator in the field of dementia, and she just recently started her own YouTube channel as well. But her life has been personally affected by having a father who has dementia. So her whole purpose is actually to educate and provide support to daughters who have a parent with dementia. And Laura also created a special gift for all you Careblazers watching, and the link is below in the description to this video. All right, now let's get to the interview. Welcome back, Careblazers. I am excited for today's guest. I'm doing an interview with the amazing Laura, and we're going to talk a lot about the challenges and difficulties of finding a caregiver and some ideas for you if you're in a situation where you're trying to find a caregiver for your loved one with dementia. If you're new to Careblazers TV, welcome. This is a place where we talk about everything dementia, and every Sunday I post a new video right here. So if you haven't already, make sure you go to www.careblazers.com and download your free Dementia Careblazers Survival Guide. Now, Laura, thank you so much for being here.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Natalie. I know we know each other through a class, and I really consider you one of my mentors in the industry. So I appreciate your help.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm so excited that we crossed paths. I love meeting other people who are passionate about helping caregivers who are caring for somebody with dementia, and that is exactly what you are. So can you just take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this field?
Sure. So my name is Laura Smothers-Chu. I am actually a caregiver myself. So I am what you would call a secondary caregiver. So my dad has dementia. He was diagnosed about 5 or 6 years ago. And I do live long distance from my parents. So my mom is taking care of my dad on a daily basis. But I, of course, help with, the decision making, the research, that type of thing. And so I am trying to help daughters now navigate dementia with their parents, because I think there's a missed opportunity, with the caregiving parent working with the daughter in this case, and really trying to figure out the best decisions to make so the person with dementia can have the best quality of life, and so can the caregiving parent.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's another good topic, and maybe we can have you back on in the future too to talk about long distance caregiving, because I do receive a lot of questions about this, but there are things that you can do from a long distance to be helpful in the caregiving process, because, not everybody lives near or with their loved one with dementia.
Absolutely. And that's actually the reason why, I've always loved seniors, and I had a personal experience actually with a paid caregiver, which is actually why I wanted to do this interview with you on this subject. It's really how I became passionate about exactly what I was going to do with seniors career-wise. And so that experience happened, which I'll get into in just a little bit. And then my dad was diagnosed with dementia, and I really felt like this was my calling. And so I have had experience in the senior care industry. So the last job was working at the Home Care Association of America, which I'll mention a little bit later in this interview and why that's important. So then I recently got a certified senior advisor credential, which is very exciting. And I'm also a certified dementia practitioner. So I'm, legit in the field, but I also, wanted to speak to people who are actually going through the process. I felt like when I was a caregiver, I would hear from doctors, I would hear from other people in the industry, but they hadn't actually had that experience. And so I felt like I, could bring a personable aspect to working with caregivers, in the sense that I've been there. So I can go into my story if you'd like, with the caregiver, the paid caregiver.
Sure. Why don't you go ahead?
Awesome. So in my 20s, my grandmom was living in upstate New York. She was living with my granddad until he passed away, and they were using the same paid caregiver. And my uncle had found out about this paid caregiver through other residents that lived in the assisted living home, and they were all very happy with this paid caregiver. And we found out like years later, after my granddad passed away, that this caregiver was stealing money from my grandma.
Oh.
And yeah. And so I, as the passionate, 20-something-year-old, I would have always been pretty assertive. I said, how can this happen? And I understood that this particular paid caregiver was still working with a lot of different clients in this assisted living building. And so I went right down to the front desk of the building and said, like, how can this happen? Where is the oversight? Why does this lady still work here? And they basically said, well, we don't employ her. And so she, works on her own, and she can come in as long as she has clients, she can come in the building. And I just thought, like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
And so when I went to grad school for nonprofit management, I actually looked up, how much does this happen for financial abuse? And, I saw that it's underreported. I saw that there's not a lot of oversight. So that became my passion. So you can tell that I'm getting very passionate about it, because honestly, there were a few things that we did not do in that process of hiring the paid caregiver that I am trying to tell daughters everywhere to make sure they do, so they don't have the same experience that we did.
Yeah. I mean, that's awful. It's heartbreaking. It happens all the time, and I see it I work a lot with people who have dementia, and I've worked with people who have lost entire life savings.
Yeah.
From having caregivers come in. But at the same time, like, it's really important, and I preach that it's important to have help.
Absolutely.
Do it on your own. And even if you could, you probably shouldn't, because it really takes a toll on you emotionally and physically and spiritually and all of that. So I really do preach, like, it's important to get help, but it's really scary. Like, these are valid concerns when some of the people that you trust to come in and help your loved ones with dementia might actually be harming them and taking advantage of them.
Absolutely. And that, that's why, again, I dedicated my life to trying to make this better. And so having worked at the Home Care Association of America, in my previous job, and by the way, anything I say in this interview is not representative of them. It's really my personal experience. But when it came time for my dad to have a caregiver come into the house, I really, put out all the stops. And those are the steps that, I'm going to tell you about.
Okay. So how about we start with the basics? Can you talk a little bit about what the difference is between home care and home health care?
Sure. So this is definitely a common question. And basically the way I like to explain it is that home care is really the non-medical assistance that you're getting in your home. So anything from dressing to cooking to cleaning. They can't administer, prescriptions or medications. It's really the companionship aspect. And what we call the activities of daily life, or the essentials of daily living, helping the person with dementia brush their teeth, things that we take for granted that we do every day. Yeah. Home health is really when the doctor prescribes the nurse to come in and give you medication or give you injections, but it doesn't always have that companionship aspect to it.
Okay. It could if you got a really good one, perhaps. But
that's true.
It's not like a common thing, I suppose. Right. Yeah, that's great. So one is more kind of medical health focused, and the other one is kind of helping with those basic daily living tasks.
Yes.
Okay, great. Can you talk about, you've already touched on them a little bit, but what are some of the biggest challenges that families face when they are like hiring a caregiver?
Absolutely. So I think especially with the websites like care.com, in one of the apps that I have, it's called Nextdoor. I don't know if you are all
Yeah.
are aware of that,
Uh-huh.
but someone had posted, oh, my wife is happy to do some errands for you and give companionship. And I kind of wrote back and I said, well, is she licensed in the state? I asked all of these questions because I think there's a lot of options that we have, but we just need to do our due diligence to make sure that, the people are licensed, that they have training in the particular type of dementia that your loved one has, that type of thing.
So we're talking about some of the biggest challenges that families might face when they're hiring a caregiver. And it sounds like some of it might be trying to decide whether to hire the easy option that might be advertised on something like a Nextdoor app or through word of mouth, or going through all of the hoops and rigors of hiring somebody who's licensed.
Absolutely. So I think it can be very tempting, especially when you see, the low price tag on people that can come in and be caregivers. In my experience, the people that charge less are, the type of paid caregiver that I talked about earlier in this interview, where they are what's called an independent contractor. So they don't work for an actual company, they work for themselves. And so there's actually a lot of risk when you hire an independent contractor. So for me, I kind of say, yes, it is a cheaper option up front, but the risk is so high. Like, for example, with my grandmom, we much would have rather, made sure that she had the background check and all of that before we hired her, because we did lose a lot of money when she stole it from my grandma. So definitely it's really important to vet those caregivers and make sure that they're through an agency. And so that's where the fact that I worked at Home Care Association of America comes in. We have they have a link where it's called Find a Provider. And so you can put in your zip code and find a caregiving agency in your area. And the really impressive thing about Home Care Association of America is that they are the only membership organization for home care business owners that have, really high standards and rigors for home care agencies to become members. So for example, they all need to be W-2 employers, which means that they, take on the liability if a caregiver was to hurt themselves on the job. They also provide workers' compensation, and they do, lots of background checks. They make sure that there's 24/7 coverage. I mean, it's all these things that, you don't think about when you're really trying to get someone to come in and, help your loved one with dementia. And it's those things that you find out afterwards and you're just like, oh, why didn't I do that? Just like my family.
Yeah. You hope these are things that never happen, like those horror stories, but they do happen. And we would want to try to minimize that from happening as much as possible. I can't help but as I'm listening, I mean, I know this, but every time I have a conversation with another professional about all this, it's quite overwhelming. To be in a position where you're loving and caring for somebody with dementia, and you're trying to hire somebody, which means your loved one needs help doing basic things that we take for granted every day. And you're faced with the cost. It's so expensive.
It is expensive.
Yeah.
And, I basically understand because Medicare doesn't cover home care, unfortunately. They might, think about doing that in the future, but for now they don't.
Yeah.
But there are some options. It really depends on your financial situation. I know that in some cases Medicaid can cover it. It really depends on your state. And definitely people use long-term care insurance to pay, but, or their savings. Unfortunately, it is private pay. But you may want to check with your area agency on aging. They are usually pretty knowledgeable about what is available in your state or, particularly where you are in the state. I know there is one program called PACE, which is basically, you're familiar with that, basically encouraging people to stay at home versus be in a nursing home or a hospital. And so they provide home and community-based services like home care sometimes. So definitely check with your area agency on aging and see if there are any, options for, lower costs. And I think there are also grants available through some states as well. So there could be quite a few options for you. And finally, veterans have a pretty good benefit as well if you want to check in with representative from the Veterans Administration.
So Careblazers, all of the agencies and resources that Laura is sharing right now, I will be sure to link them below in this video so that you can go check them out on your own. But as I know, and Laura, I'm sure you know as well, right? Dementia affects everybody, everywhere. Like there's no but one like really safe, no area that's super safe from this. And Careblazers who are outside of the United States. So can you just do a quick rundown in terms of, those who might not be able to use like the Home Care Association of America and Area Agency on Aging? What are the very basics that Careblazers everywhere should be considering or thinking about or looking for to try to make whoever they hire as safe as possible?
Absolutely. So definitely the background check. That is really beneficial because, you can see if they have been involved in any criminal activity in the past. Although that is unfortunately not a guarantee because it could be their first time visiting someone's house. You could be the first ones that they're visiting. You know what I mean? So there could be a potential of criminal activity. So again, definitely go through a, well-renowned agency that is in your area. I recommend, looking at, Google reviews or any type of consumer reviews that you can find for the company and look at, the 5 stars, look at the 1 star, try to get a full picture of this company. And also something that you can do yourself is, install cameras. I know that there's a lot of pretty inexpensive cameras you can put in now. And I mean, cameras are helpful for someone with dementia anyway. Even if the paid caregiver is amazing and, they are not doing any funny business, there could always be someone else to come in. It could be someone who is painting the living room, unfortunately, our elders are vulnerable. And I found that out, through my personal experience and things that I've heard now in the industry. And so cameras can be helpful. I think also towards the last stages of dementia, if you want to make sure that you're, in my case, that my dad didn't leave the house, cameras can be very helpful. So I think that's a really good thing. And also, I would say before your first visit, or before rather the caregiver's first visit, I would maybe put some valuables like in a lockbox in the bank. That's what I suggested that my mom do before our caregiver came over for the first visit. That way you're doing it ahead of time. So, it's not awkward if things are suddenly in a different place and the paid caregiver, gets, takes it personally or something. So if you can do it beforehand, then you can have that peace of mind.
Yeah, those are some great ideas. As an aside, just for fun, I mean, cameras don't always have to be just for safety. I have one in my home to peek in on Guinness.
I do too. Yep.
You're a dog lover too, right?
Yes. Yes. Okay. I have a dog and a cat. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, we briefly touched on this, but caregivers are expensive, like hiring through an agency. Is it really worth it? Because I imagine it's possible that a bad egg gets into a good agency, right? And it's possible that somebody who doesn't work for an agency could be really great.
So yes, I think in my personal experience that it is worth it, especially because, I feel like I made the best decisions that I could now that I'm knowledgeable. And so the fact that I went through the find a provider options that Natalie will share that, you know, I really feel like it is worth it, because as Natalie mentioned earlier, she has known people who have lost their life savings. And also, again, in our experience, we weren't able to seek any legal or financial recourse, basically, as a consequence of the paid caregiver stealing money from my grandma, because I think this independent contractor had a particular relationship with the judge. I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but it was definitely a lot harder to bring legal charges to her. And unfortunately, she is still working as a paid caregiver as we speak.
And what I can say, just from experience of having worked with many, many families where this has happened, it's also difficult to prove that that person with dementia, even though they had dementia, didn't technically didn't want that to happen or didn't agree to it, or you know, for the most part, we want to, the legal system wants to give everybody as much rights as they can, even when they do have certain diagnoses, like, you know, a specific type of dementia. So that can be hard to tease apart as two. And that's why I also really stress monitor accounts, families. Like, it doesn't mean you have to jump in there and take over everything. And you do want to let them, you know, have a little bit of spending money if that makes sense, or have a little bit of control if that still makes sense. I mean, there's no one right way to manage every single situation, right? There's all kinds of personal factors that have to be considered, but monitor accounts sooner rather than later, so that you might be able to catch some fishy activity. And maybe activity's totally fine, but at least you can do a little bit of digging and investigate before you look at the account and it's all wiped out.
That is a great tip. And that's the kind of stuff that I teach in my YouTube channel for daughters, to really keep track of that. I mean, that's why I think that it's really valuable to have help from the daughters, that the, you know, caregiving spouse is not just having to handle everything by themselves. Because I know that my mom was and is super overwhelmed on a day-to-day basis, and it can be really hard to see the forest through the trees. And so that's why I think that having the daughter know about these things ahead of time, and you know, like I tell my mom, the daughter can just tell their parents what to look out for, or the daughter can do it themselves.
So briefly touch on this already, but just to make sure there's not anything else that we're missing. When it comes to being able to afford one of these caregivers, you mentioned, you know, contacting the area agency on aging. They might have some ideas. There's also grants available possibly through them, or that they might know about. I personally know a Careblazer who got a grant through the Alzheimer's Association. And so kind of looking into different associations with that specific type of dementia. And then if your loved one happens to be a veteran, by all means, please go to the VA, because there are a lot of benefits that they will pay for when it comes to being an older veteran in particular. Anything else that I missed in terms of trying to help caregivers pay for this?
No, I think that's it. And I think you touched on this, but it is so important that, you know, when you do recognize that you need help, that you do get some help, just because your physical health is so important, your mental health is so important. And, you know, studies have found that majority of the time, the caregivers taking care of the person with dementia are actually in worse health. So we want you to take care of yourselves. Respite is so important. So yeah, but I would definitely say, if you're outside of the US, contacting your local government and just asking about any services for elders or elders with dementia. I know in a lot of cases, and I'm sure Natalie knows this, in quite a few European countries, I feel like they are more advanced than we are as far as being dementia friendly. So it never hurts to ask.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you. So Laura, thank you so much for being here. I know you
you have a YouTube channel, which anybody who's watching here, it's just a really quick button and swipe over to be able to watch Laura on her YouTube channel. And you being a daughter of somebody who has dementia, that's kind of really where your heart is at, being able to help your daughters. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your channel's name and all of that.
Yeah. So my channel name is Joy in Dementia. And I know that that sounds strange, but I really do think that there is a way to have a positive approach to this disease, and also a practical approach. So I like to do a step-by-step guide. It's similar to what Natalie does, where she provides the information, one piece of information in each video. Because I really felt like I would have loved a YouTube channel when my dad was first diagnosed, especially with a daughter who was my age that understood what I had been through. And also, she wasn't just telling me her story, but she was telling me steps to take. So, I wouldn't have to make the same mistakes that she did.
Yeah, awesome. So Joy in Dementia, for anybody watching who wants to get more information about dementia and how to care, particularly for a parent with dementia, especially if you're a daughter, but the things that we talked about today in this video apply to anybody. Yeah. So there might be some other goodies that you can find over there on that channel. And Laura, you put together a special gift for Careblazers. Can you tell us what it is?
Yeah, so it is the 10-step guide to home care. And so I have a link to the Home Care Association of America Find a Provider in there. And it really spans the gamut of, once you decide that you're ready to pay a caregiver, it goes through, everything that you would need to know, is even through the last stage of dementia as well. So I hope that you find that helpful. It does have, some precautions that I mentioned here in the interview, but also really great things like, the fact that you want to communicate with the agency on a regular basis. You really want to find the best match caregiver for your loved one with dementia and for you. So there's a lot of great stuff in there, and I would love it if you checked it out.
Okay, so that's a 10-step guide. What I'll do is I will put a link to that guide below this video. So Careblazer, you can just go below and click on the link and put in your information, and it'll get sent straight to your inbox. Laura, thank you so much for taking time to talk to my Careblazers. I'm so excited that you're doing what you're doing. I wish you all the best of luck. And everybody, again, go check out Joy in Dementia. All right, Careblazers, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think by leaving a comment below. And as always, I'll be back next week. Bye.